English translation 182nd Contact. Part 2. Thursday, 3rd of February, 1983, 22:31 hours.
And will this succeed? And also, how will the dishonest Pope express himself? Yet he is too cowardly to put in a word for the fact that the assassin be set free because he fears too much for his miserable life.
I will talk about the success or failure later. Yes, you are right about the Pope. He is a coward, which is why he will not advocate, at least the first time, with a word for the release of the murderer and assassin and, thus, for the preservation of the life of the girl. He will only do it when he can be sure of his life in good measure. But he does not care about the life of the girl in any wise. In every case, he is only concerned about his own advantage, and only acts if it strengthens his image.
Presumably, he will only speak a word when the child is beyond help. As I estimate the guy, it cannot be otherwise.
Unfortunately, you hit the truth. But continue to listen because accordingly there are still more things that will be of importance for the human beings of the earth, even though it will only be so because everything will be hyped. The next such event will take place around the month of September, but the date remains unclear. At this coming time, a Korean passenger jet will be shot down by the Russian air defense, to which approximately 270 humans will fall victim. And it will happen that the whole world will grumble against the Russians and, at other times, will do more injustice to this nation, despite the fact that Israel, for example, has already done the same, and that the airspace damage of the Korean airplane will be steered by secret American forces. This will be for provocation and in connection with disarmament negotiations between Russia and America, which will take place at that time in Geneva. Of course, what happens over time in the interests of the Earthlings will flatten out again, but will reach the Americans. And in particular, President Reagan, marked by deceit and war addiction, will be the reason why the Russians will fall into the crossfire of a worldwide protest, which will be accepting to Reagan's plans.
I received several letters from America, and they clearly show that the Americans want to own the weapons monopoly over the earth, whereby they are also seeking the status of a military world police power in order to be able to control everything. I will present these letters to you next time.
Unfortunately, that is correct, because the aspiration of the Americans actually lies in that direction, whereby they even have the audacity, under the guise of peacekeeping and peacemaking, to interfere in foreign affairs and allow military forces to break into foreign countries. But at least in Lebanon, they will pay dearly because, as a future review showed, the American peacekeeping forces will suffer heavy losses by an Arab suicide mission around the 20th of October 1983, when Palestinian forces load a truck with explosives and drive into the headquarters of the Americans in order to detonate the load there, as this will also be the case in the headquarters of the French troops in Lebanon. Unfortunately, things are not yet recognized quite clearly in this respect, but there will likely be 250 to 300 deaths. But for this, the Americans are expected to prepare an evil retaliatory strike because the vindictiveness and war addiction of President Reagan knows no boundaries. In addition, he will already allow a new act of war to be carried out just days after the attack, and will let American troops invade the island of Grenada, which again will result in many deaths.
And of course, Reagan will again find a justification for this, which is apart from himself.
Unfortunately, that will again be so, for the Earth humans are blind and deaf to the truth, even in other things, as represented by the military. It is especially like this in reference to earthquakes because it simply does not want to be recognized that many of the earthquakes are only triggered by the human causes, as this will also be the case with the quake that will take place around the turn of October and November in northeast Turkey, to which approximately 2,150 people will fall victim.
So this would have to be in Kars or Erzurum again, right?
That is of correctness, because the district Erzurum will be the part that will mainly be affected the most. An area that you know very well. However, this will not be the only earthquake at this time, because still another area that is well known to you will be shaken by a heavy quake only about 10 days later. So namely Liège and the closer and wider environment, but mainly only property damage will result, fortunately with only a few deaths, which will hardly be 3. But otherwise, a larger disaster will occur again only a few days later, when the Americans will irresponsibly bring new combat missiles into Europe, namely into England for the time being, even though the disarmament negotiations in Geneva will not yet have prospered so far that even just a prospect for a solution would be evident.
Aha. At the same time, I remember the prophecies that speak of the fact that the Great Bear will break in over the North Sea coming into England. When I consider this in such a manner, the missiles could very well be a reason, perhaps, why an attack on England takes place in the distant future.
Your reasoning is not wrong, because the reasons very well lie therein, but the missiles are not the direct, pivotal point. They are, however, an unmistakable sign of the time of the fulfillment of the prophecies, as will also be the enormous peace demonstrations that will find their implementation in many European countries and primarily in Germany, only a few days earlier, before the Americans bring their combat missiles into England.
I understand. It means that somewhere, the call for peace in 100,000-fold form speaks of that time when the world events cannot be delayed anymore. Thus, the prophecies must be fulfilled, and the Third World War will come soon. And truly only a miracle can still save the world and the people, who summon in unison the death and destruction, even though their cry is for peace and rest. That is what one says, if I am not mistaken.
You are not mistaken, and your words are correct and accurate, as they are given by this prophecy. This prophecy, however, is not given to Earth humanity. Rather, it comes from the stock of prophecies that are given to the prophets alone, and where the data of events is contained and about which silence must be preserved, in order not to provoke something that can still be prevented by sufficient reason, nevertheless.
Of course, that is true, and I also comply with this provision. Never have I mentioned the contents of these prophecies in such a manner that accurate data could be taken from it. Moreover, everything can first be prevented.
The talk was not about that, but I am surprised that you talk about that.
It just momentarily escaped me, in what connection I know these prophecies. My head and my memory have often given me difficulties since my accident and the serious concussion.
That is understandable, but you should allow yourself more rest, which you now actually need very much more than ever before.
All right, but you know that sometimes I just have rather large difficulties with my memory. So now I currently dig around in notes in order to reacquaint myself with everything that has escaped me. As for example, the note that I have here regarding information that Sim Ya-se once gave to me. It says here, Vega forms a new planetary system, and here, the dust rings around the Sol system, and here, the 2 other planets in the Sol system. With regard to these notes, I would like to know from you what it is all about, for I do not exactly remember.
About that, nothing should officially become known to the Earth humans yet, for first toward the end of the year, 1983, might the time be ripe for that. But if until then, you do not provide the information to the Earth humans, then I may well be helpful to you in short form. Concerning Vega, your note refers to the fact that in the area of Vega and Lyra, a cosmic process takes place which produces new stars. This is a fact that is still unknown to the Earth scientists, but it will be grasped in the near future. Your note regarding the dust rings around the Sol system presumably may have been made by you with regard to a conversation, in which Sim Yase explained to you the origin of the various fine dust rings around the Sol system, about which you were surprised at that time when you became aware of them. And in
Aha, now it dawns on me again, but just tell me more. If one throws me a stone, then I can fathom the approach.
That is understandable and good, but hear now what the note means with regard to the two other planets in the SOL system. It probably involves the explanation of Sim Yase, that the Sun is orbited by two dwarf planets, which have remained hidden to the terrestrial scientists until now, and which orbit very far beyond Pluto's orbit around the Sol system.
Oh, I see. Then it concerns the explanations pertaining to the yet undiscovered minor planets, Elin and Anar, as you call them. Although, in certain Earth circles, there are, indeed, speculations among Earthlings over the existence of other planets, and in addition, one of the two unknowns is called Uni or Trans-Pluto.
That is of correctness.
Good. But now I have yet another question, which is important to me and also to other people. It deals with that which was explained to me by you, being that, on Earth, alterations have come about in the atomic structure of some constituents, and indeed through the fault of the Earth humans. If I remember correctly about that, it was said to me then that everything can be up to about 2,000 years older or younger than can be analyzed using the best methods.
It has the...
Excuse me, please, but I want to retell everything myself, because I also want to establish whether my memory still functions correctly. The precise erroneous number of years should amount to about 2,000. So therefore, in each case, this number of years must be added to or subtracted from a result.
That is of correctness, yet the details relating to this would lead too far, were we to now once again discuss them thoroughly.
Good. Then in the course of time, in the near future, I will write an article for the Aquarian Age that thoroughly engages this theme, and which I can then attach as an addendum, so to speak, to this contact report, if that is acceptable to you.
I am in agreement with that, yet you should only attach the article to the contact report once you have provided it to me for inspection, so mistakes can be avoided.
Naturally, I am in agreement with that.
Explanation according to the previous conversation.
The dates of the performance list given here do not correspond in any wise with the dates given by earthly scientists. The difference between the data of the Pleiaren and the Earth scientists is about 2,000 years, for which the Pleiaren, however, have to give a plausible explanation, which is not to the liking of the Earth scientists, who carry out age determinations of all possible and impossible things with the most modern equipment and methods of analysis. The Pleiaren explain that the earthly devices and apparatus for age determination and also the purely chemical age determination processes are very sophisticated and to a large extent exact, so that good and sometimes even approximately exact age determination results can be produced by the scientists, but that in age determination processes with certain materials and which exceed an age of 1,538 years BC, erroneous results occur, which can result in an error difference of up to 1,842 years. And this takes the form, it is explained by the Pleiaren, of a material older than 1,438 years BC having suffered atomic degradation, whereby 1,142 years are simply missing from the decaying process. This, it is explained, affects the accurate measurement of the half-life decay of certain materials by up to 142 years, which means that anything measured and analyzed with an age of 1,450 years BC, for example, can actually be up to 1,142 years older. In this case, 392 years BC, because 1,450 BC and 1,142 add up to 3,392 BC. The Pleiaren further say that this blatant change in certain materials of the Earth came about because the human beings of the Earth, through their madness, caused atomic and chemical processes in all spheres. G. Geosphere, atmosphere, chromosphere, stratosphere, etc., which produced certain radiations, which influenced and changed certain materials on the Earth in such a wise that disturbances occurred in the atomic and molecular balance and caused changes in various materials of greater age than 1,138 years. BC, as it is explained, whole half-value structures are said to have been erased, so that an exact analysis is only possible if the missing time of the half-value structures of 1942 is added to or subtracted from the obtained result. If the obtained age determination is over 1,138 years BC. This also explains the difference between the Pleiarans and the Earth scientists' statements. For example, in the case of the Santorini catastrophe and the time of Moses, which is given by the Earth scientists as approx. Qualis formanted B. C, while the Pleiarans state the time of 1453 BC. The Pleiarans' data for the time of Moses and the Santorini catastrophe up to the year 1511 BC result in a difference of 1,942 years. Thus, the difference to the assumptions of the earthly scientists, who assume the events around Santorini and Moses to have taken place approximately in the time of 1500 BC, an assumption that is understandable when one considers that they do not include the missing 1,142 years of transformation and change of certain earthly matter in their calculations, because they lack the necessary knowledge of this fact. Through the statements and clarification of the Pleiaren, it therefore becomes clear that through the unreasonableness and insanity of Earth humans, certain parts of earthly matter have also already suffered an irreparable transformation and change right into the planetary core, whereby an exact determination of the age of various matter can differ by 1,142 years upwards and to a higher value. If this matter is older than 1,238 years BC, in and of itself, this does not play a major role when aging of millions and billions of years is still being reckoned with. But this fact then plays an important role when, for example, historical proofs of age are to be created, because there are up to 1,942 years missing each time when the matter to be analyzed is older than 1,038 years BC. As a result, a completely different picture emerges in the entire historical research of the early history of humankind. And on the basis of the further time periods alone, many previously unsolved mysteries suddenly become explicable. The conclusion from this should be that Earth humans should devote themselves less to their delusions of grandeur and reveling in them, but that they should concern themselves more with the truth and with their exuberant madness, so that they reduce it and accept and follow the actual truth. For this would lead them to begin to live correctly and to lay aside their ambitions anchored in greed, hatred, and the lust for power and profit, and to lead a life that is pleasing to creation. For truly, the human being of the earth is not the only human being in the universe, and in relation to what exists, they are less than a flea in infinite space. Let them therefore be instructed by those who come to the earth from the vastness of space, who bring truth to earth humans and endeavor to bring the laws and recommendations of the creation to the human beings of the blue planet, and thus truth, wisdom, knowledge, and truthful love. Billy.
Then I can continue with my remarks?
Sure, because at the moment I have no further questions.
Also, if possible, we should now remain with my remarks, for I still have a few things to explain.
Of course, but if questions go hunting through my head, then I must give you these. Otherwise, I will forget them. You know, though, my head in the memory.
That is of correctness. I will take that into consideration.
For which I am really grateful to you.
So be it. But now I really should devote myself to my remarks again.
Then fire away at last.
Next, I have to report from the months of November and December, during which a great deal of new and malevolent acts of war will arise in Lebanon, where the Americans will officially intervene in the fighting, but under the guise of self-defense.
This, of course, is only a pretext.
That is of correctness. The same or similar pretexts, or even wrong, invented pretexts will also be decisive for many other events of the future, whereby also the members, friends, and acquaintances of your group, and perhaps even you, will suffer harm. The course is already set to proceed with intrigues against the truth and, therefore, against you and the mission. In the future, even the authorities will no longer shy away from lies and intrigues. And with purchased false witnesses, they will work against you and the truth and against the group members and your friends, acquaintances, and advocates. These authorities fear the truth, and you and all those who are associated with you, just as you are also feared by the wrong UFO groups and UFO organizations, which will also pull together and will newly take to the field with bribed authorities, having fresh power against you and the truth. Ways are already being prepared in order to spread, in the most infamous ways, new lies against you and the mission, and thus against us, whereby they will not hold back from heavily burdening innocent human beings with false accusations and false testimonies in order to discredit them in such a wise that imprisonments and other harsh and unjustified punitive measures could result for those who are innocent.
Florina's note, 1/1/2004. This later happened, for example, in the case of Wendell C. Stevens.
And these could encounter any one of your group members, as well as you yourself or your friends or acquaintances in every country of the earth where they always live, go, and dwell. Since the authoritative powers of the UFO organizations could not align anything against you, the truth, the mission, and us with their recent slanderous actions, they are now trying to take action against you and the truth and against the mission and us through joint intrigues with the authorities, by inventing false allegations and by bringing in perjurers who, with good remuneration, are willing to swear to the wrong UFO organizations and the authorities and other forces of defamation. Thus, they conjure up lies as truth and make false accusations, which are directed against you and the truth and against the mission and against us, but they are also directed against all those who represent our mission and the truth and you. So therefore, your immediate group members, your friends, acquaintances, and advocates, and all those involved with you in any other manner or who insert a word for you.
You speak as though it might happen to us really badly.
That is of correctness, because even murder and deliberate misrepresentation of justice may emerge, as well as betrayal within your own ranks, which will extend into the immediate family, as well as possibly kidnapping and extortion, but certainly renewed assassination attempts, which you already know too well and have experienced.
This comes somewhat suddenly, what you say here.
This is not so sudden because everything was set long in advance, whereby the first steps toward these intrigues have already been taken, about which I may not inform you now, however. Anyhow, it is such that for you and all your friends, group members, and for your acquaintances and advocates, From now on, extreme caution is necessary. For now, the true enemies will not shy away from any intrigues, even if these will still be so common and destructive and murderous, whereby it must be said that first and foremost, everything will be specifically aligned toward your own person, so less toward the group members.
Does the U.S. film of Larry Young perhaps play a part in this?
That is correct, because the film has set in motion all sorts of things and has not caused a particularly mild shock to those who have worked by all means against you and our mission and, therefore, against the truth, and in particular, the MUFON and Jim Lorenzen stand in the foreground as a front of a worldwide combat group against you and the truth, and thus against us and our common mission.
Nevertheless, I will not give up.
This decision lies solely with you and your group members, because you are those who are exposed to the actual and direct battle. Even though you initially suffered other injuries, and you still remain spared in a direct form, which can soon change, nevertheless, if the betrayal comes to you,
Then the betrayal should just come.
it will be, and you can be sure that various group members will also contribute due damage to this, which will not exactly be light. It even must be counted on, and it is certain that by unreasonableness and injustice, your family connections will be destroyed.
Then it can still become really cheerful.
That is correct, but unfortunately, this will not change in any wise because it is also based on the principle that the grain must be separated from the chaff. But concerning this, we should have spoken enough now, for I still have to inform you of other things. Around the 9th of February 1984, a change will arise in the world political scene again, because the Russian ruler Yuri Andropov will depart from this life and be replaced by a man named Chernenko. What will emerge from this cannot accurately be predicted yet because things are still unclear for them to be calculated.
Certainly a lot will not change, right?
Everything is still unclear, as I already said.
Then just not.
About a month after these events, something new is expected to happen, because once again, an ancient prophecy will start to become fulfilled. Surely you can remember that in reference to the prophecies, one spoke of the fact that in Egypt, a village would be exposed in the desert, which would be a sign of the times.
Yes, I remember that. Why?
About a month after Andropov's death, a sandstorm at that place will expose a building, which will then ultimately lead to the discovery of the ancient village in the vicinity of the Nile, as it was prophesied. This will result because the relative archaeological work and nature will work more intensively after the new discovery.
It is good that you speak of this. I once received a prophecy, according to which at a certain time the Vesuvius volcano should erupt.
You have become forgetful. My friend, because the two of us have also spoken together about this, but I will tell you again that this eruption of the volcano should actually take place if inconsistencies do not arise in the whole situation. And the eruption should be one of the last signs of the fact that a third world war can no longer be prevented under any circumstances and will come thereafter in the foreseeable future, but always to the extent that the prophecy would be fulfilled and that it would not become null and void as a result of reasonable changes.
Right, now I remember again. You know, sometimes I have so much running around in my head that somehow I can no longer recall things at the right time.
However, as a person, you adapt yourself more than just very well, my friend, and I often ask myself how you endure the human condition in general. With your origin, your human body must prepare and must have always prepared evil sufferings for you. But just that you can endure this proves to me that even I could never take your place. For this, one must have already had a very long material life behind himself in order to be able to endure such torments in a susceptible host body.
I do dream back sometimes, as a person can do this, you know?
Very well, my friend. But I could not endure it, nevertheless, because I am just not capable of it yet as a human being, as well as all other humans. Hell must truly be tantamount to another paradise for you.
Sometimes, I feel a bit helpless and miserable, especially when loneliness becomes too oppressive. But let's leave this because you have other things that must be said.
That is of correctness, even if there is not a lot to report for the time being. What is moving, perhaps, is that in the middle of the year the Pope will now visit Switzerland. This will at least interest the Catholic world. Then, in late July and into August, severe thunderstorms will afflict many countries, whereby also Switzerland will be hit hard, as well as Germany, Russia, India, Australia, Korea, and Mexico. Moreover, in the Philippines there will be more than 200 people killed by a hurricane.
Then the environment strikes back once again, which is hard-pressed and destroyed by humankind. But for this, I just have a question, namely in relation to the decline of nature, particularly the trees. Surely you can tell me what the main factor actually is, which causes nature to be dying.
Do you primarily address the decline of forests?
Yes, and I am also interested in how high the percentage will be in Europe in the autumn of 1984.
You speak of the percentage of the affected forest area?
Excuse me if I expressed myself unclearly. Yes, I speak of this.
As our calculations yield, already by the autumn of 1984, 54% of the supply of trees in Europe will be damaged due to illness. This is the average of our calculations.
And what is the principal and most toxic substance that will allow nature to die?
For this, as we can presently determine, the chief fault lies with the electromagnetic radiation and the lead gasoline, which are used for a variety of means of transportation and commercial machines. The gasoline contains tetrethyl lead, which passes through the exhaust pipes and into the open air. But there, it changes under the solar radiation into triethyl lead. This is a highly toxic substance that causes cancerous diseases and which is also taken up by the trees and plants, etc.
And how long does it take then until the trees, for example, get sick?
It depends on the circumstances. It is certain that the poison has a very large long-term effect. Thus, in already poisoned trees, the diseases often only appear years later. The needle-leaf trees are primarily endangered by this, because as a rule they take in 12 times more toxins than normal leaf trees.
That is also why the conifers become sick first.
Where the leaf trees, however, do not become spared, it is just that they will get sick later since they absorb fewer toxins.
But all other toxins are also decisive, right?
That is of correctness. Lead gasoline, along with the electromagnetic radiation, is just another main factor in the chain of natural death. Only a complete ban on these substances could provide quick and effective relief.
Humans are not so clever and life-loving, however.
If nature dies, then life also dies, especially since the trees, after plankton, are the other main suppliers of oxygen.
That is right. And if the trees are gone, then life starts to die in general, because the oxygen becomes more and more scarce.
That is of correctness. The electromagnetic radiation must be curbed immediately, and the diesel and lead gasoline engines should be banned as soon as possible because they are really large culprits in the health of nature and humans. But the Earth humans will discover this for themselves shortly before that prophecy is fulfilled, which you received from Patah Li on the 30th of January 1976.
At the moment, I cannot remember what prophecy this concerns.
It is that one which speaks of the scorpion.
Ah, now I remember. It says in that prophecy that shortly before the monsoon season, in the country of the elephant and the peacock, the reigning scorpion will die. In addition, if I have understood this prophecy correctly, then the death of the scorpion should result through force.
That is correct, but talk of a forcible death of the scorpion only appears in the prophecy in a hidden form.
Yes, I remember. Then Indira Gandhi in India will be murdered because she holds the office of Prime Minister at the time.
That is of correctness.
Her astrological sign is Scorpio.
And also in the month of Scorpio, she will be murdered, namely on the 31st of October, 1984.
And who will commit the crime?
It will be her own people, so namely men of her bodyguard.
And who will take over the office of Prime Minister for her? Is that already certain?
That is likewise already determined. Indira Gandhi's son Rajiv will assume office.
And will one catch the assassin?
There will be several, at least 3. As our preview showed, one will be shot, one will be critically injured, and a third will be arrested.
Yes. And how will Indira Gandhi be killed then?
By shots, she will be hit by 10 of them.
A true slaughter. And one cannot do anything about this again, right?
You should know that such an endeavor would be futile, because things that are determined in such a wise are the equivalent of an unchangeable programming, so they are unstoppable.
And what is the reason for the murder?
Indira Gandhi will make the Sikhs mortal enemies to herself in the course of the year 1984, and these will then have her be murdered out of revenge. But with the assassination, there is still an element of uncertainty in the sense that it is not quite clear whether the third assassin is of the party of the one who is to be wounded. Thus, it could be that 3 as well as only 2 bodyguards will be involved in the assassination attempt. What is still to be mentioned in this case is that the death of the Prime Minister will trigger a campaign of revenge throughout India against the religious members of the bodyguard, who will fall victim to 2,700 people.
Then a great deal will happen there in India.
That will be a fact.
But this also is not likely to change.
No, but the events will not occupy the world public for too long, because the choice of the American president will outplay this event a few days later.
And who will be the new president?
As things develop until then, Ronald Reagan will be re-elected.
Are you sure of that? What a stupid question.
Naturally.
I already said that I asked a stupid question. If you were not sure, then you would not have said it.
That is of correctness.
And what is the next incident?
Perhaps it would be worth mentioning that Ethiopia will once again suffer from a massive famine, but this will already be at hand much earlier than the assassination attempt in India.
Do you mean, nevertheless, that the largest effects will appear around the time of the assassination attempt?
No, for the effects will already be very devastating much earlier. What I want to say is that in the course of that time, the world public will first be made properly aware of this catastrophe. Thus, the famine will then become a world interest.
Oh, I see. And the problem can be solved then?
No, of course not, for there will not be enough assistance.
As this is always so in such cases. Moreover, I think that such assistance only enlarges the problem.
That is of correctness, because each assistance provided in such concerns magnifies a problem. Each assistance is not used where it would have to be used. The rule with the Earth humans is that they always only consider assistance in the face of hunger.
Whereby they then overlook the main evils and problems, and they neither fight against these nor resolve them in any wise.
That is of correctness, my friend. You have recognized things correctly.
With the ring of Neptune, if the people of the earth would let themselves be led and taught, then a lot of the evil of this world could lie in overpopulation.
That is of absolute correctness. The majority of all vile things, machinations, and catastrophes must be searched for in overpopulation. But I never talked to you about the other matter. How do you know that?
I do not understand you.
You spoke of the ring of Neptune. According to my knowledge, I have never told you that even this planet has a ring.
Oh, I see. Simyase used this expression once, after which I asked her for the meaning. She then explained to me that even Neptune has a ring, like all the giant planets of the Sol system. So thus my wisdom.
Simyase should not have done that, for this fact still is not known to the Earth humans. Yet it has happened, and on the other hand, this truth will indeed be discovered in the coming years.
So it will soon no longer be a secret.
That is of correctness. But now, hear what will happen further in the coming time. On Monday, November 19th, 1984, a great gas catastrophe will occur in Mexico City, and about 450 people will die. However, this disaster will only be the beginning of a whole number of smaller gas catastrophes all over the world. But only a short time after Mexico City, so we have calculated, an even more enormous gas catastrophe will break out in India, in Bhopal, which will demand 2,562 human lives, while tens of thousands of other people will suffer from poisoning and long-term damage. Like in many other cases of catastrophes on the Earth, however, the actual number of victims will not be mentioned and will be understated, which will naturally result in a false picture. Then, after the catastrophe in Bhopal, nothing really will appear, which would be worth mentioning since it will not be world-moving. First, with the date of the 10th of March 1985 does an event then follow, which will move the world public, namely when the Russian leader, Chernenko, dies, and a new man arrives at the head of the government, who will be called Mikhail Gorbachev.
Not really a lot of movement for the purpose of the thinking of the Earth humans, because the many deaths during the catastrophes will be forgotten just as quickly as the events in Moscow. The people of the Earth are short-thinking, and they only get excited just at the moment of an event. Once an event is over, they become forgetful, and they think that it is all over for them.
That is unfortunately a fact that cannot be dismissed, and which will probably always remain incomprehensible to us.
This is also incomprehensible to me.
The Earth human is very short-lived in his or her memories of things that do not concern them. They are very selfish and care little for their neighbor, which is why they also displace such memories and learn nothing from them.
That is also my opinion, but that probably is not to be changed so quickly.
Yes, it will still take a lot of time to complete.
Full insight probably will not even be attained when the Earth folk will have brought the greatest catastrophe of all Earth time upon their planet. I just wonder how much it will actually take before the human beings of this world come to their senses and finally begin to live in accordance with the laws of the creation.
That is correct. But listen further. The new man of Moscow, Mikhail Gorbachev, will be the great reformer, by whose will and works a lot will change all over the world, even though he in the course of his reform will soon take in a lot of setbacks, about which I will explain different things to you later. But to a large extent, Sim Yaseh already reported to you in the month of October 1980 about the reforms of Mikhail Gorbachev and their global consequences, so there is really no need for further explanations. Also, concerning everything related to your peace meditation, in which 3,500,000 of our group are also included, she also even explained this to you at that time. But she told you nothing about the adverse events and the dangers to the good course of Gorbachev, which will happen through the evil machinations of power-hungry individuals and extremists and radicals in different Russian countries, such as Azerbaijan, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, etc., and which will jeopardize the entire work of Gorbachev. And she also told you nothing about the war that will go down in the annals of world history, starting from 1991, as the Gulf War. Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq, whom you personally know so well, and of whom you always said that he would be the worst butcher of humans if he would only find the opportunity to carry out his murderous plans, will have a military invasion of Kuwait on the 2nd of August 1990, and will, thus, trigger a multinational punitive action, which will be headed by the Americans. From this, a battle will develop, which will be unequaled until now. For about a month, multinational troops will bomb Iraq in unprecedented consequence, before the real battle begins on the ground. The criminal, unscrupulous, malicious, uncompromising, murderous Saddam Hussein will avenge himself and will allow billions of liters of earth petroleum to be pumped into the waters of the Gulf, whereby he will very soon receive the infamous title Criminal Against Humanity.
Thus, a military alliance will emerge, which will take up arms against the creep. Man, this can become cheerful, for Saddam Hussein will not be the one to give way. I know him well enough from my stay there, when I was in Iraq. At that time, about 25 years ago, he was still young, about the same age as me. His views, which he explained to me, were so extreme, as he himself is in his whole character. A serious criminal from an early age, he ran into conflict again and again with the police, also because of extreme political machinations at around the age of 15 or 16 years. Even murder was a part of his daily existence, but he was never caught. When he came to power around the turning point of the 80s, he even murdered his opponents and enemies by his own hand. The guy told me at that time that he would also shit on all of Islam. He literally said that to me because he thought of the Islamic faith just as little as he thought of any other faith. Religion, so he told me at that time, was only useful for him, in any case, in order to make the idiotic people docile and subservient to a political or military leader. With a shit faith, one can always get the humans of low intelligentum to make him a master and a leader, and then, these would be subservient in order for him safely to shed blood. If he would take to the helm and, thus, would come to power, so he told me, then he would know how to take the idiotic people and make them be enslaved to himself. He would simply play the part of a good Muslim and, if necessary, would fall on his knees towards Mecca in public and would hypocritically pray. Thus, the stupid people would certainly run after him and would congratulate him, cheer, and make him the absolute ruler. Thus, he would become master and emperor over all Arab countries, and soon it would then also be attainable to him to take over the world and become a world-dominating great emperor. He strives to achieve this goal, and every means is good enough for him, even if hundreds of millions of people would die as a result. The guy is not just a megalomaniac and a limitless fanatic of the most bloodthirsty violence and destruction, but he is crazy and insane, and is a danger to the entire Earth. He would subjugate the entire Earth to himself with blood, and would subdue it if only he could. The only way to stop his power-hungry plans is a multinational logical act of force against him. But certainly, idiotic peace criers all over the world will try to prevent this through demonstrations and the like, and also in various crazy Arab camps, there will be a pro-Hussein cry. But these poor lunatics will not know what they try to arrange through this, because if Saddam Hussein would win, should it actually come to this conflict mentioned by you, then this would not only mean the subjugation and possibly the death of the pro-criers or peace criers, but also the ever bloodiest enslavement and torment of all of Earth humanity. Man, oh man, I know this guy Saddam Hussein and I know what he is capable of. If everything actually arrives as you say, and I do not doubt your words, then one should send all the idiotic peace criers and pro-Hussein criers into the desert.
Your statements correspond to all correctness. But unfortunately, there will be other culprits to be named when the war breaks out in the Gulf in January of 1991, because Saddam Hussein will react to any attempts toward peace just as negatively as to an ultimatum. After which the Allied bombardment against Iraq will begin in the first hours of the morning on about the 16th of January. Also to be named as culpable in this war will be all those who build bunkers and chemical factories, as well as many other war technical plants for Saddam Hussein. Even weapons suppliers and weapons system improving engineers, etc., are also included. Last but not least to be mentioned is Ronald Reagan, who laid the foundation stone for his war policy in general, so that these machinations of a serious and world-threatening nature could and can appear. But to explain the individual points would take too long.
That is understood, but tell me, will many businesses and companies not fall into trouble and even bankruptcy as a result of this Gulf War?
Unfortunately, that will be the case, also in Switzerland.
He is a merciless killer and destroyer of global proportions. He disregards everything the world holds in honor. He will also not shy away from calling up fanatical terrorists all over the world to carry out their murderous attacks of all kinds and everywhere, causing immense damage and destroying human lives. Thus, this war will have worldwide consequences and cause worldwide damage and criminal terrorist attacks that could make one afraid. It is fortunate that this is not the Third World War, which may still be preventable, as Sim Ya-se said.
Nevertheless, this coming war in the Gulf will be waged worldwide, even though it actually is not the Third World War, which is mentioned in the prophecies, and which can perhaps be averted after all.
Good. Let's leave this. We should not get too deeply involved in these war interests with ifs and buts.
That is correct. But it should perhaps still be mentioned that this upcoming Gulf War shall be more of a punitive action than an actual war, even though the whole thing will have serious and global consequences.
So with that, all that is necessary would probably be said. Now, a question concerning Venus. I mean the planet Venus. All sorts of things have changed there. But I am not exactly interested in those changes that are already known to us, such as the gigantic sand reductions, etc. The atmosphere is what interests me. How old is it already?
You simply know very well how to switch a topic abruptly. Good. Now, the atmosphere of the planet Venus has an age of approximately 720 million years. But still to be mentioned is that it consists primarily of carbon dioxide and is about 90 times denser than Earth's atmosphere.
Good. And what about, for example, the weathering at high altitudes, where I naturally speak of the mountains?
There are, among other things, lava cones that are more than 8,000 meters tall and that have diameters of up to 35 kilometers. These giant volcanic cones, however, are untouched by rain and, thus, by water erosion, but they are blown over by powerful winds that often carry with themselves fine sand and very often smooth, polished rocks. But the enormous and gigantic winds and volcanic cones are not just for the planet Venus, because on many other planets, which are foreign to the SOL system, and which are far larger than Venus. Even more enormous volcanoes, mountains, and winds prevail.
Is there anything else special in relation to the planets and such? Are there perhaps cosmic events that are worth knowing?
Certainly, but the event will first report itself in the year 1991. From the depths of interstellar space, a dense and immense cloud of fine matter will approach, which will have penetrated so far into the SOL system by about the middle of the month of February that it will then be located halfway between the planets Saturn and Uranus. A fact that actually would not be noticed by the earthly astronomers if they were not pursuing the path of Halley's Comet, which will be located in the northern part of the constellation Hydra at that time. These observations will most likely lead to the fact that a tremendous change in the fluorescent ratio of the comet will appear because it will penetrate into this cloud of interstellar dust and then cross it, which will naturally have as a consequence that powerful frictional forces will develop, which will allow the comet to light up 346 times more strongly than what is the case in its normal state.
Then this will certainly also remain no secret to the Earth's citizens, for certainly the newspapers will report about this, but probably again with incredible explanations that are not true.
That might correspond to the truth.
Thus the usual. But now, I have yet another question regarding what you said about Saddam Hussein and Kuwait, etc. You have not revealed how the Gulf crisis or even the punitive action against Iraq will turn out, and what specific things are thereby yet to be expected.
As I told you, there will be an enormous bombardment of multinational troops on Iraq and Kuwait, which will last for about a month, and which has no parallels on Earth to date and will not have any up to that time. More precisely, this bombardment will last a month and a week and will decimate and demoralize the Iraqi army units to such an extent that, after the ground offensive begins, they will surrender by the tens of thousands, starved, wounded, sick, demoralized, and, in some cases, psychologically at the end of their tether. After the ground attack, a 100-hour battle will take place, during which the entire Iraqi army and also Saddam Hussein's elite units, the Republican Guards, will be beaten, after which the U.S. President Bush will then order a ceasefire, namely for the time around 8 or 9 o'clock Iraqi time on the 28th of February, 1991.
Then at this time, Kuwait might also become free again.
That will already be the case on the 27th of February. Nevertheless, Kuwait will be destroyed to a very great extent, and before the ceasefire, the fleeing Iraqis will still kidnap many Kuwaitis as hostages, taking them before, but even at the beginning of, the cruel massacre of the population under occupation, to which women, children, adolescents, and men of every age will fall victim. Women and children will be raped and abused in order to violate them after that, so that intimate body parts can be cut from their bodies, which will then be swung by the assassin's hands in triumph and be hung up as trophies everywhere. Nevertheless, for a long time, this still will not be enough with the atrocities of the inhuman Iraqi soldiers, for before they flee or surrender to the Allies, they will still set on fire Kuwait's sources of oil and will make the ecological disaster, which was caused by the earth petroleum that was led into the Gulf, even larger. From the oil fires, thick black soot clouds of smoke will arise, which will not only cause wide-area black rain precipitation in several countries, but they will also be very toxic and will destroy much biological life. For a long time, the sun will also be darkened by the black smoke, and all kinds of life will be destroyed.
If immature and ones of low intelligentum achieve power and weapons, then they will cause incredible destruction with them and release worldwide catastrophes. In addition to immaturity and low intelligentum, still religious fanaticism and subservience come together for the degenerated, overbearing jerks who are so clever, however, that they are able to beat the people into bondage. But how will things continue then, after the ceasefire?
Subsequently, there will be a genocidal attempt on the Kurds, which Saddam Hussein will pursue after a civil war is murderously put down by his troops. But in everything, the Americans will not bear the least guilt because the American President Bush will request the Iraqi army to direct opposition against the dictator Hussein and to his overthrow, whereby he will indirectly animate the Kurds to this as well. However, if the Iraqi people actually rise up against their dictator, then Bush will simply withdraw himself and then leave the Iraqi people to their misery and to the clutches of their murderous tormentor and murderer, as is customary with many Americans in their attitude and conduct. Nevertheless, America is not only controlled by such inhumane and false elements, since truthfully also human beings living there, and just these will be the ones who will compel the Bush administration to take action, while still giving support to the Kurds, who make use of the army stationed in Iraq to help and benefit them. But this cannot prevent the fact that during the worst time, more than 1,000 Kurdish refugees will die daily in the inhospitable and wintry mountains of Kurdistan, which you know from your own experience, and you know how life-hostile they are. Deprivation, hardships, exhaustion, and diseases will be the causes of death of the refugees, just as also the military and inhumane acts of violence of the Iraqi army, which will also carry over there into the third millennium, which will lead to the second Iraqi war via the Americans, under the patronage of Bush's son, George Walker, who will then be U.S. President, who will lie to the people about alleged weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and will fail miserably in Iraq with the army. In addition, terrorism will act further, whereby a complete conflagration will be released from Arabia, at least in the Middle East.
And Saddam Hussein, what happens to him?
His end will come much later, but about this I will report to you some other time if it will still be permitted to me, for I should not deal with these things any further.
Well, will other things and events still arise that are connected to the murder of Saddam Hussein?
Certainly. The chief event of the Iraqi troops in Kuwait will be a time from which a wide-ranging cholera epidemic must be counted on, which will demand thousands of lives, particularly in Latin America, but also in several other countries around the world.
So once again, a time of a large cholera epidemic. But what happens if Saddam Hussein is not knocked off of his throne?
Then over the course of the next decades, it would have to be counted on that the Middle East, and even the entire world, could be threatened by a new war. He is power-hungry, autocratic, and dangerous, like a pit full of irritated, venomous snakes. However, the overthrow of the dictator should not occur by foreign powers, but only by his own people. Otherwise, more harm than good will result, and a wildfire could arise, as I already explained.
That is a good concept, venomous snakes, which actually could have even come to my mind.
It honors me to be a length ahead of you for once.
That is, to be a nose length ahead.
That was the meaning of my words.
Well, then, so be it.
Do you still have any questions that I should answer for you?
At the moment, not really, unless you might still have any other predictions.
I have told you everything that I had to explain to you. Officially, I am not allowed to say more. So unfortunately, I must tell you this now. That is it for now once again. I will probably no longer be able to give you more predictions because this task is to be taken over by another power person, but this has not been determined yet.
Then we will see when the time comes.
Then now I want to say goodbye. Goodbye.
Take care until mid-year.
Until then, goodbye.